I suppose that in some ways, calling that freak Rupert a roommate isn't quite accurate, even if we did end up sharing the space and being far closer and sharing more intimate moments than I ever would have liked. I guess you would say we are flatmates, but even that isn't quite right. The way the setup worked was that he and I shared rooms 10 and 11 in an apartment block, but the rooms were connected. Both rooms were accessed through a single front door, but the private bedroom spaces were actually arranged one room on top of the other. What this meant was that we entered through the same door and into a shared kitchen and corridor. We had our own rooms and bathrooms. Access to Rupert's room was through a small door next to mine that led up a flight of stairs to an attic room, so he lived almost directly above me. We sometimes see each other when he left for work, or if I came back late from the gym, but we rarely spent any real time together. Both of us were more interested in doing things in our own rooms. He never ate at home, so we didn't share meals, and in the whole time I was there, I never once saw him use the communal space. Mostly, our interactions consisted of small notes we would leave for each other on the tiny notice board attached to the fridge, usually quite dry or inconsequential things like, need to buy milk or don't forget gas bill due on the 26th, but sometimes there would be more personal or pleasant things. I remember him writing to wish me good luck on a big presentation I was working on and thinking that it was a nice gesture. I hadn't even told him about it, but he must have seen my books and notes scattered all over the kitchen and the multiple mugs of coffee I had going at once during the build-up and figured that I was stressed. It was a small thing, but that little gesture, to take the time to show that he was thinking of me on the morning the presentation was due and I was stupidly nervous, meant a lot to me. I didn't see much of him, but I had kinda chalked Rupert up as one of the nice guys. It was only later, when I really thought about it, that I realized that I should have noticed from the start. Because when I actually thought about it, when I really reflected and retraced my movements in the run-up to that date, it was clear that I actually didn't leave notebooks in the kitchen. Sure, I had sometimes, but for that particular project I had done almost all of my studying in my room. I remember sitting with the research material laid out in front of me, or piled in little towers all around, so that I looked in the wardrobe mirror like some kind of Godzilla surrounded by skyscrapers made of paper. I had seen that in my wardrobe mirror because I had been in my room. At the time I hadn't noticed, but later it made sense. I think maybe that was the first, more personal message, and I responded with my own short note, thanking him and drawing a small love heart on the note. I went to work, did the presentation, and it was a great success. Happy that everything had gone so well, I made a note to tell Rupert and thank him again for his best wishes. When I got him though, Rupert wasn't there. He had left me a note, however, one that I didn't really understand, that read, "Pink is my favorite color." Okay, I thought, good to know. I went into my room and began getting ready to shower, wondering if the message was supposed to be some kind of hint, some clue that I could buy him a gift to say thanks, which I thought was a bit over the top. I considered this as I absent-mindedly tossed my work clothes onto the back of a chair and was just about to step into the shower when I caught sight of myself in the wardrobe mirror. Pink, my underwear, the set of bra and panties that I always wore for big occasions because I thought they were lucky, was bright pink. Surely, I thought, Rupert couldn't have been making a reference to that. I shook my head and showered, dismissing the thought as stupid. The following day, however, there was a new message on the fridge. It read simply, "You're pretty when you sleep." That freaked me out. When had Rupert seen me sleeping? How had he seen me? Suddenly the idea that the pink comment might have been a reference to my underwear seemed a lot more likely. That night I decided to do an experiment. From the bottom of my wardrobe, I dug out an old sports shirt, Raiders I think it was, that an ex-boyfriend had given me. I decided I was going to wear it in my room, but nowhere else. If Rupert commented on it, then I would know for certain that somehow he was able to see me when I was in my own room. Sure enough, the next morning, there on the fridge was the phrase, "Go Raiders." I should have gone to the police. I should have called up and told them that this creep was spying on me, that somehow he was seeing me, at night, in my private room. Instead, I marched up the stairs and rapped heavily on his door, demanding that he see me and offer some kind of explanation. When he didn't answer the door, I forced my shoulder against it, and in a fit of outrage at the intrusion into my privacy, broke the lock on the door and entered the room. What I found, I still find difficult to believe. The room had no floor, or at least that's how it looked. All you could see when you looked in was an aerial view of the apartment below, the kitchen, the living area, and to the back, my bedroom and shower. It was at that point that I did call the police. The explanation they gave me was that whilst the ceiling of my room and the rest of the apartment seemed to be made up of ugly black metallic tiles, they were actually one surface of a two-way mirror. The entire floor of Rupert's apartment, the whole thing from his side, was as transparent as glass, and though I couldn't tell from below, he could look directly into my room and the space below at all times. Worse than this, however, were the walls. For whilst the floor was completely clear, the walls were adorned with pictures, photographs taken from above, of girls who had lived in the apartment below before me. Photos of them in various states of undress were plastered all over the walls. Photos he had taken through his transparent floor, my glass ceiling. Some of the photos were of me. Rupert was arrested later that day. He was charged with far more than I expected. According to the police, whilst I had the right to feel violated, scared and upset, I had also, most likely, had a very lucky escape. The 4 other girls seen in the pictures are all still missing. In the United States, it seems like the process of getting a college roommate is always going to go one of 2 ways. Either the whole experience of sharing is a horror story from start to finish, with details of how their roommate was obnoxious, weird, or chronically unhygienic, or they met someone they really clicked with and with whom they have remained friends for life. There is no in-between. There are, however, extremes at either end. Stories of people who met their roommate at college and went on to marry them or their siblings. Stories of roommates who went on to start successful businesses together. That is on the good side. My story is way over the other side, at the extremes of the creepy stories or strange occurrences. I met Baxter on my first day of college. We were introduced to each other by almost falling over one another, trying to fit through the small door of our dorm room. The room itself was tiny, a single bed on either side of the room against the wall, a desk at the end of that bed with a single chair, also pressed up against the wall, and a cupboard with chest of drawers inside close to the door for clothes and belongings. Laying in bed at night, if I lay on my side, I would be literally less than 4 feet from Beta laying in his. This struck both of us a bit of a weird setup, and we joked about the idea of falling asleep, staring into each other's eyes. Baxter was good for a joke, though we didn't associate much socially, since I already had my own group of friends, and he spent the majority of his time in the library or the lab. He seemed a decent kinds guy, and we shared a few good nights drinking in the room or sharing a pizza whilst watching some stupid show on one of our laptops. Things with Baxter began to change the day I arrived back at our room, to find that he had rigged up a sheet and washing line contraption that split the room down the middle and acted like a curtain shielding one side from the other completely. At first I thought he'd make a joke point of this, saying something like it would stop us having to smell each other's breath each morning, but instead, speaking from behind the sheet so that I could only see his silhouette, he snapped at me that he needed privacy, that I was always getting into his space. I took offense to this. Up to that point, Baxter and I had never had a crossword, but now, almost completely out of nowhere, he had gotten angry and decided to take this drastic step. I probably would have snapped back at him, and maybe I should have, but I didn't. I didn't because there was something deeply unsettling about that shadow. The shape and silhouette that spoke to me angrily in Baxter's voice did not look like Baxter at all. It was bigger, fuller in the shoulders, and oddly lopsided, as if he was leaning heavily to one side or wearing a backpack. I decided to spend the next day or 2 with friends, sleeping on couches and partying in the evening. It was at one of these parties that a mutual friend began telling my host about my supposed sweet tooth. When I stared at him blankly, explaining that I had no idea what he was talking about, the friend laughed and explained that he had seen the deliveries. Boxes and boxes of candy bars, like hundreds of them, being delivered to my dorm room. I didn't know anything about these deliveries, and Baxter certainly hadn't shared any of the candy with me. Maybe I thought he's running some kind of event, a fundraiser or some such, and plans to sell the candy on. I decided I'd ask him about it the next time I saw him, if he ever came out from behind his little curtain. Returning to my room the following morning, I found that I couldn't get inside. My key worked and the door opened just far enough for me to see that it had been chained shut from the inside. Obviously, I was livid because all my stuff was still in there. I called the building management and the student affairs department and was told to go to an office and wait. I never went back to that room. Instead, my stuff was boxed up and moved to another room, which I was to occupy alone. I never saw Baxter again. The room I had stayed in, and in fact that entire portion of the student accommodation, was closed off, and as far as I know, still is. I heard tons of rumors about what happened to Baxter, a lot of which worried me. Some said he contracted some hideous illness from a plant he had been working with. Others that he went mad and started hacking off parts of himself with a razor blade, ears, nose, and eventually fingers and toes. Perhaps the creepiest story I heard, though, was that a team in full hazmat gear was called to clear the room. According to one of the biology professors who had let slip one night in a local bar, whilst drunk, the team removed from the room a pupa or chrysalis, made from a thin, flexible material like a sheet of skin that was covered all over with arteries, veins, and even hair. This sack or egg thing was almost 7 feet long and hanging from the far wall. When the team removed it for study, it was empty. I'm not the only one who never saw Baxter again. He hasn't been seen since. But I can't help wondering if, for some period of time, he was the one inside it,